even got all these new underwears just in case I do have sexy time. They're gonna be way cute.
Mm.
Well, they're patterned. They're not like any sort of sexy cutter. Like, it's definitely still a boxer briefs kind of dude. But at least the underwears themselves are cute. Felt like I needed to have doodle things close by.
I think it's time for some sage for this round.
Okay,
Yeah,
still good.
very good.
Nice. The wine is still good. Ooh, it's a deep bottle.
All right, so can you believe it's about to be 2022?
No, I don't even know how we got to 2022.
I know, I was like, is it not still 2019?
Yeah, how did that all happen?
Time is a construct these days. Always. Here.
2022.
2022. Yeah, like I said, this decade was going to be interesting. And so let's talk about the pandemic. COVID-19, coronavirus, Omicron, Delta. This is actually kind of, so this whole like thing is like stems from my quarantine state of mind. I guess this is the new season of quarantine state of mind. A little bit more structured. We still have wine, still got the sage and Palo Santo to cleanse the spirit.
Yeah.
But what do you think some of the biggest things that you've learned or felt or experienced over the last 2 years, almost 2 years we've been in this?
I think we're hoping and praying we're watching a shift in culture, but it's not going quite, it's not a smooth one. Mm-hmm. This is definitely one of those, I think that we're in a midlife crisis, or America's going through an identity crisis. Mm-hmm. I think there's this...
Well, America's an experiment anyway. Huh? I said America's an experiment anyways.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's like a romanticized version of what America thought it is, was, and will be. Mm. And then there's like the behind the scenes truth. There's like, this romanticized movie. There's like okay, this is how I look at it. Hallmark plays this like really romanticized version of what love is.
Yeah.
And then like there's like real life, and we all know it's not Hallmark. That it really comes with ups and downs and not fist fights, but sometimes fist fights. But there's like the nitty gritty. You're not in love all the time, and there's times where you just don't want to be in the same room. And I think and there's opposing views. And when you look at America, you look at people who are literally trying to act like we can't teach our own history. Like that's like we can't face the music. And I think there's a lot of us, working in the corporate world, starting to realize, this isn't how we were meant to be. Like there's certain things that have been super outdated. There are structures that are way outdated. Like they worked at a specific time, but we evolve. Humans evolve. Society evolves. And there's like being stuck in the mud, being stuck in these, like, when I hear people say like, oh, I'm a foundationalist or I'm a constitutionalist, it's like the Constitution was meant to be a living, active, breathing document. It was made to have amendments. We didn't have machine guns. We were riding horses. We barely had electricity. We didn't have electricity. Fuck that. We didn't even have electricity. Like there's there's things that we change. We learn more. We know more. I mean, we know more from even when the Bible was written, right? Like they couldn't even, they weren't crossing the seas in boats. I mean, maybe they were at that point. I don't know my history very well. But things happened in what form, fashion. Like I'm not sure when the first boat sailed across the Pacific and the Atlantic. But my point is, like, there was a time in which we looked at the stars and we prayed to rain gods. And I'm not saying they're not up there, but we know a little more and understand, like, those are stars. There's not people living in the 25 meters around the Earth. Like, there's galaxies and space in between. We didn't have that knowledge back then. And with that knowledge, there comes, like, a deeper level of understanding of human being. Mm-hmm. And I think there's people who are gay or trans who don't fit into this construct or this, like, I don't want to call it a brainwashing. It's just that, what am I looking for?
I mean,
the indoctrination.
I mean, yeah.
The indoctrination of what, like, we've been told, oh, to be happy, you need to be married and have children.
I think that has been proven. That does not make people happy.
And you got to go to church on Sundays. And, you got to salute and put your hand over. Like, there's certain things that we've told ourselves, like, this is what constitutes X, Y, Z. But we're starting to realize, like, there's a lot of overlap. Things are very, very fluid. You can practice multiple religions. You can love who you want to. You are both feminine and masculine. And I think these, we're having more and more of these conversations, and, you're spending this whole work from home for all of COVID from 2019. Like, everyone was going in and commuting because they were told they had to come into the office, and they had to get in that car, and they had to commute for 30 minutes to get there, and they had to be there on time, and they're expected to be at meetings. And now you're like, we can still be successful and not be here. That was all a made up construct that you said. I'm like, look how we are at home. And, back in the 50s and 60s, a single income could provide for a household. That other person had a full-time job at home, taking care of the home. And now you have individuals like yourself who are doing all of that by themselves in their 40-hour work week. And we know that that's not right. And we know that there are people who are working 60, 80 hours a week. We know that there are people dropping dead in places like Japan because they have this idea of, like, to be a good person, I have to be a model person in society, and I have to not question this, and I have to work extra hard, and I have to put my foot down, and just, like, I just got to power through. I'm not saying all Japanese people like that, or that is the Japanese culture, but as an example, there are many of us who look at this like, the more I work and the harder I work, the better employee and the better human I am. And we're starting to realize, like, that doesn't equate to success, happiness, and success or joy. Mm-hmm. For some people, maybe that is their joy, right? Like, maybe coding 15 hours a day is their absolute heaven. And that structure may work for some folks, but it doesn't work for everybody. And I think people are starting to realize, like, I think they're starting to look at they're asking themselves, not seeing, they're asking themselves, why am I doing what I'm doing? Mm-hmm. There's different ways to get things done. The last 2 years have shown us the different ways to get things done. People were forced to get creative about how they were making income. They were forced to get creative on how they were getting their resources. I think a lot of people are starting to bring back that power of barter and trading, where everything used to be like, I have to have money to pay for this thing and have the services. And even our government and bureaucratic in our business structures, like, you can only have an education from these many places because that's the only thing that gives you an accredited stamp. You can, they make it really hard for you to go off the grid. Like, you have to buy power, you have to buy trash, you have to buy electricity,
water.
They've made water a commodity, because I can't say the other word right now, but they've made all of our natural resources commodities except for air. So far, they haven't started taxing us for air. But they tax you for your land, they tax you for the water, they tax you for your heat and your energy and your electricity. You're seeing more and more people leave corporate life to go to homesteading. Middle America is nothing but homesteading, who've been trying to make a living homesteading all their lives, but, you've got things like Tyson Farms that take up all of that, and they make a commodity out of. And I think people are starting to look, and I keep saying this, like, tribe. Obviously, I'm interested in homesteading and building a tribe and having all my people there and living off the land. Like, I would love to do that. But, people have different ideas of how they want to spend their life. Like some people don't want to homestead. People want to live in a big city. I look at Verge. Verge's like, I am not ever going to go to the country. I will forever live in a cement jungle. Call it cool. And they're just so there's different ways to do life and be human. And there's just like these systems or these structures that really want to corral people in a specific way. And you look at Jurassic Park, and it's like nature will always find a way to burst out of that. And you look at all these, Hunger Games movies, and it's just human beings were never meant to be corralled. We're meant to be free thinkers. We're meant to think differently. We're meant to be
in tune with nature.
In tune with nature, right? Like you look at Native Americans and how they were living off the land as they needed it, not as big game hunters. Like they were respectful of who the human was in the greater scheme of life as the circle of life. And we'll call it Western civilization, but we'll like the industrialization, and there's just like this whole, and I think that's part of how we've gotten too big for Earth, because we made her a commodity and we're not working with her. We're just ravaging her and taking from her. And that's, I think, the 2019, we're coming to reckoning with a little bit of that. Like Mother Nature will reset itself depending on how we're occupying her.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to have these labs, I don't know that all of us exactly know exactly where COVID came from, but right now we're being told it was birthed out of a lab and it went free. But that's human nature, right? Like we're not robots. We leave doors unlocked. We accidentally leave cabinets unlocked because we're going to step away for 1 second. We didn't close this tight all the way. Like whatever the universe has in store is going to happen. That escaped, cool. We wiped out 1 million people, a couple million people, or maybe it's going to be Mother Nature has a earthquake, or it could be a giant volcano, and that takes out Earth, or that takes out the human species. There's many ways that we can go. But while we have time on this planet, how are we going to spend that time? And a lot of people are like, capitalism, why? Why this structure of capitalism? And when you're actively watching people trying to censor education, at the same time that people are now engaging with this conversation of why does my job have to be like this? Why am I being asked to live here? My money goes further over here. Why are, so there's like all of this difference, and then there's the fight about abortion. Then there's all the noise, all the propaganda. I think a lot of people in 2019, 2020, and now 2021, we lived through chaos for quite a bit, and I think that birthed a lot of just divide and a lot of anger. Now people are really trying to figure out the aftermath of that. And this is the aftermath, and it's not a very pretty, I wouldn't call it a very pretty time. I think it's been pretty stressful. I've been super lucky and fortunate to have an incredible job. It's also stressed me the fuck out the last 2 years, though, on the other side. Like, I don't think I've ever been more stressed. But at the same time, being more financially secure and not worried about my basic human fundamentals. So I think people are going to have a different experience. Like, that's clearly just mine. I didn't live on the side of, I wasn't sure how I'm going to get toilet paper or be able to pay for that, or like
that whole thing, that whole phenomenon of the toilet paper is
right,
so bizarre.
Right, like how they just put us there. I want to say they put us there, but like how everything got held hostage and put on lockdown in such a way. And it's just like watching human behavior, and then you're just like, is this real life? But it is, because here we are and we're talking about it, and we, looking back at that date that just like, oh, we're gonna go back to normalcy, and it's just like, but this is our new normal. It's been our new normal for 3 years. At what point is this just like we're transitioning obviously into something new? And I think that we're going through a transition, and I've been through one. I'm still going through one.
It's scary. It's painful. It's
there's days where it's like, this is really great, and then there's days where I'm like, what? I didn't sign up for none of this. this. Everything's on my nerves, and there's days where I'm like, fuck yeah, I've got total clear direction. I've got no fear and inhibitions. This is the greatest thing. And the wind blows the other direction. I don't know. But that's how I feel about COVID. I think a lot of people are taking a time to really reflect. They ain't got shit else to do. They don't have anything else to do but think about how things are going. They have nothing else to do but figure out what their opinion is on every living matter and topic. Some people are still with their heads in the sand.
That's the easiest thing for some to do.
And some people are like, fuck it, I'm going to go out with a bang and I'm do whatever, however, whenever, and not look back. So, but I think these last couple of years with COVID have really sort of brought some sort of, I don't want to say reckoning, but it's definitely, I think, forced people to reevaluate. And they've reevaluated many things: personal, career, relationship. I think we are struggling to see who we want to be and how we want things to be. And some people are trying new things out. I watched or I heard something that, and I look at the economy and I look at the different labor forces, right? Like we work in brick and mortars and we work schedules, right? I don't want to say we have time clocks, but we kind of have these like time clock jobs. You go in, you do something for, you work for a company, you get paid, and you have your insurances and your whatnots. And we're looking at a lot of people whose industry is being an influencer. And there is no set schedule. And part of it is your entire life, your curated life, is on display. And if you're live 24/7, then you're on display. And that's how people make money. And I'm not saying that they don't do an honest day's work, but there's not it's different. It's a different commerce now. And I think that's another thing that people...
Yeah, the creative economy.
Right, so it's a whole different... and I think there's people who resent that because they think like, oh, you haven't put in the years to get work experience. Like, you haven't had to go work for the man. Like, you have to work for yourself. But hustling for yourself is not easy. And putting yourself out there is not easy. And living in a digital footprint is not easy. I mean, for some people, when you grow up with all you know is apps and like maybe it is easier for them. And then them having to go do different kind of skills are going to be challenging for them because they haven't done that. But things change. Like computer engineering was not an industry. And now it's an industry. I mean, there are certain things that have been here since the dawn of time. Prostitution has always been an industry. It's never been respected as it should be and like honored for the work that it is because we don't like to talk about sex. No one wants to talk about sex.
Yeah.
And so we taboo it and it becomes a taboo industry, but it's the oldest profession.
Yeah.
It's the oldest industry, it's the oldest profession, and there it is, but we don't ever want to, I don't know, like, there you go. And then there's just, like, we need to, and I think we're starting, and that's what I'm coming back to, is more and more young people, and this goes for a couple this is, for me, multifaceted. There are more people who are now, due to how we can access information, how we can quickly access explanations, dialogues, and whatnot, and watch videos, more people are starting to understand the construct of gender and sex and the conflation of the two, and you're watching more people come out and be gay at younger ages and become trans at younger ages, or living their authentic truth at younger ages, right? Like, that's a thing. And when I was talking about that industry thing, we're watching more people live a nomad life, which I found very shocking. And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of that, like, with inflation and obviously with jobs not paying to match that inflation, people can't buy houses. They're now looking at alternative ways of living. So that's, and I think more people are also watching that. If you're someone who got to work from home and, you could make a living working from home, and you're like, I don't want to be in this surrounding. And I think that people are starting to find that. I've even been, and I told you this, I've asked myself, do I want to stay in where I'm at, or do I want to give up that financial security and take a risk doing something different?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking at the influencer path. Like, I want to change career fields altogether. And at 40, that's terrifying.
Is it?
Like, a little bit. There's a little bit of like, fuck, am I going to start all over again and go back to school? And how do I do that still having a job? Like, can I have a job? Can I have the job that I have and pay attention and being a brand new freshman? Like, how does that work? So there's, how do I want to spend my next 40 years? Do I want to continue doing what I'm doing that right now is not bringing me very much happiness? But, I also don't want to conflate it with, when I got this job, that's when COVID hit. So it changed what the job was, and I had to adapt with it. And so there's something to be learned there. And then maybe there's just a time to move on. Maybe I was only meant to do that for that time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that wasn't a long-term gig. And so I think that's all of it. Like, I look at COVID as this forced upon us to take a break. I mean, the world stopped. It literally stopped. And asked people, like, no, you need to stay inside and be with yourself. Be with whoever the fuck is next to you, because we're all stuck and you may not like them. And no more distractions. I mean, they're back, but like, you only get so many now. So stop and sit and think. And I think that was the catalyst for a lot of these other conversations to spark. And maybe people just did have too much time on their hands. I don't know. But Pandora's box has been opened, and we can't put it back inside. And you're right, it is going to take a decade for us to reckon with that. It's only been, we're starting year number 3 out of 10. If we're just basing it on like a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I think societal change happens in these increments, like incremental, like leaps of industrialization. And one of the things that fascinates me about like AI and like technology is I was just listening to a podcast of like, there may become like a point where like artificial intelligence becomes able to identify something that the human brain or consciousness can't really process, because our minds and our brains didn't come up with whatever that thing that AI discovers, because you have all these algorithms that kind of work together to
yeah. Yeah.
But what I think is what technology will never have is like that is to be human, is to have that like that real empathy, or that real like feeling of self and identity and place and space and where you spend that time.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know machine learning. I haven't studied any part of it. I know nothing. I take that back, I know nothing. But there is the thought of like a human being calculates in a particular way where machines calculate in a particular way, right? They're fed algorithms and they're fed
back to the Matrix analogy as well.
Yeah, right. Like, it's fed information and it makes these calculated information on being what it's fed. And we're the same. And if you think about it, like, we're the same way. We take in information and we think about it and we think about it and we think about it. And I don't know where that where you start to measure level of consciousness. Like, at what point does this machine start
excelling faster than the human consciousness?
Yeah, that and that bit. Like, there's a lot to go with it. Yeah, I mean, I find it exciting, right? Like,
I do too.
It's a very fascinating and interesting place, and then I do have like my own reservations, right? Like, what does that mean for labor and work when we start automating everything there is to automate? You look at manufacturing plants, and you look at, we talk about customer service, and that's something that a robot can never replace. And I'm not saying that they don't great, but sometimes, and robots aren't listening. It's computing. Like, you asked for a cheeseburger, I'm always going to make you a cheeseburger. And except for that one time that I don't. Like, every once in a while, like, there's always going to be that fuck up. But because the milkshake machine ain't working today. But there is that thought of like, all right, well, what are human beings going to do? Are they just going to watch the screens and make sure the robots are doing what the robots are doing? And I'm obviously really dumbing it down because I haven't studied machine learning. And then there's that other side of it, like a machine getting to know you, and you automate your entire house, right? Like, lights turn on. No, dim it 50%. You're blinding me. Play soothing music, and it's learn what music soothes you. Right? There's like that. There's that half of it. There's like the fear of like, oh my god, it's going to take over, and then there's that fear of like, but if we do it correctly, it's enhancing. It's not taking over. It's accompanying us. Like, we are one with it, and so, seeing something as a threat rather than seeing in how the ways it benefits. Not obviously not losing our sight of whatever else there is to be considered or whatnot, but yeah, I think there is a lot to be said about technology, as you were talking about it, right? The ways in which it leaps and how quickly things have started to come about. I mean, look at all the technology we've seen since we were born.
Yeah.
Having no internet to having internet.
Remember the AOL discs? All the discs.
Yeah. Like having a system that does these things at your fingertips versus like having to go out there and building it yourself and building a fort so that you figure out, oh, that's how gravity works. There's not an experiment. I'm going to go find out gravity the real way. Fall off, I'm going to go climb that, and then I'm going to miss a rung and I'm going to fall down. The higher I fall from, the more it hurts. Like, I don't know. I don't want to say I'm on a tangent, but I know there's just more to talk about it in that realm. I haven't done the reading, and I haven't seen the different ways in which they're applying machine learning or artificial intelligence. But knowing that it's there to work with. And I think, well, maybe where did it come from? Did it come from Area 51? Like, we saw something.
Now you're speaking my language.
Like, we saw an application, and we're like, ooh, we should replicate that. And then, like, what is this whole race for these billionaires to go to space? Or, I don't know. I know I'm going.
No. This is.
But there's just like all these different. There's just all these different like. When you go up to a certain level, you start seeing things in a different way.
Consciousness. Well, there's consciousness, I think, as a collective species, and then there's just intuition of like asking why. Like, why do I feel this way about this thing? Because I feel like the machines will learn differently, but our own pattern recognition as human beings and that muscle memory. What fascinates me about it is like there's humans kind of are a version of AI, but it's still intelligence overall, and so you have these learned experiences, and this all kind of like ties into really everything that we're talking about, but our individual experiences, like we were born into something and we realized this doesn't really seem right, but there was like certain moments throughout like my life where I'm like I was conscious enough to know what was happening but not fully understand it. And then there were moments where I was conscious and I did understand, or I was reading something or being taught something, and I'm like, that doesn't really like add up. That doesn't make sense, or that timeline, or I don't like why. And so like those things intuitively for me have always been present. And when I was younger, like I just never fully understood it. And so I kind of keep some of those thoughts, to myself, unless I have someone to like talk to that also has like what some people might say are crazy thoughts, or people like, or that's a conspiracy theory. But why is it given those terms or those labels by people that we know manipulation is a real thing. We know that people at the highest levels of leadership um, have been empowered and emboldened to spread factual lies, and so many people just gravitate to it because they want something, they need something. It's like they have nothing else to really hold on to within their own circle, so they just like see this thing projected onto them through whatever screen or audio frequency, and then they take it as fact. And that's why millions of people are currently dying and getting sick, because factual lies are being told by people that they look up to. And that's always been the truth. I mean, that's always been, from what I've experienced personally, what I've seen, when someone is just blatantly telling a lie or withholding truth or creating a false narrative of a particular story or topic, when you're like, that's not really making sense. It doesn't really add up to all these other facts. But yet you're presenting this truth as truth, and I'm supposed to take that as fact, when there's all these other like things that, you know, I'm being general in this moment of like just dissecting different moments where like people empowered in positions of leadership roles, where they just like, for whatever reason, they've been given this power to disseminate information, and it's killing people. Like currently, it's like when I think of COVID and what it's doing, I believe in science, I believe in technology, I believe in people more than anything. um, but I'm also more fearful of people than I am like machines. I'm more fearful of someone doing something erratic because their emotional state becomes unhinged. Like that, it makes me more fearful than like robots taking over the world. It's seeing these people that go out on these like shootings, and this I don't even want to say his name, but this young person that's now like touring around the America for being acquitted for shooting people, and thousands of people are applauding him, for him being American, or like being that like, and like this young person shot and killed other people because these other, for whatever reason, he made that choice, like not to get too far into it, but like the fact that he shot and killed another human being, several, and there was a loss of life, and yet other people are applauding him for that, whatever that is. Like that's a loss of humanity, that's a loss of people being connected to one another. And I think that's what makes me more fearful than anything is, I've seen people become unhinged. I know what it's like to kind of lose my sense of reality when it comes to, how I perceive certain things. But I'm not an aggressive person unless someone pushes me to that. Like, but yet that gets projected onto me. I'm a threat. But you have a consistent amount of this particular grouping of people that continuously show up with guns and say, like, that is my right. Yes, absolutely, that is your right. It's my right. It's, America, America, and I think I genuinely still believe in the concept of a free America. I believe in liberty. I believe in the pursuit of happiness. I believe in justice. Um, but there's so much at play, and so many people that get raised up to into positions of power and decision making, where I'm like, why the fuck are you making a decision that affects women's reproductive rights or my right to love and marry someone? No wonder why I don't even know how to fucking date a man, because I don't, like, it's not something I'm taught. No wonder I, you know, contracted HIV, because I didn't know, the right ways of caring for myself. um, those things that people intentionally create to control others, that is what I'm more fearful of. But I'm also more hopeful for the people like us that have also been lifted up in our own ways and given opportunities that people before us that think like us never got the opportunity to. And that's what I love about going into, the bar trade here is like when I go to the restroom, it's almost like a memorial when I see all those like images. I think you may have like, I was like, you got to use the restroom. There's something about like the history of the gay man that I find so personal that it's it's like why were gay men targeted, and why was that, how did that, you're going to tell me HIV came from someone fucking a monkey, and then that kind of like specifically went to cities that, because again gay men are into bestiality, so they had to have fucked a monkey. All these different things. um, but then that's like fringe territory of like that's a conspiracy, right? But when you think of the facts and how free love was such a predominant thing in the early, like in the late 60s and 70s, and then 20 years later HIV hits and eradicates and instills fear within the human population for people that were becoming aware of their sexual. And I think that's something, as a look back into like Native American cultures and having that duality of masculine and feminine, and even like certain like medicine men being like that were medicine people that were like born transvestite with both body parts. They were revered as spiritual, as like being able to be in tune to both. um, so for me, I just like where I'm at now, being here in Washington D.C., like literally not even a 10-minute walk to the White House at the seat of the global power. I just like just being here right now. One, I was like saying something's going to change in 2020, something drastic. I kept saying it. I don't know where it came from, but I felt it. Then I'm here in DC in the midst of it all during a really intense period. And I get here the year that COVID-19 like erupts, and really begins the change. And so like I think of the future and my future and your, the people I care about, your future, like I believe in the possibilities. I believe in the possibilities of America really reckoning itself. There's going to be a lot more pain before anything gets better, but um, I feel like that's somewhat of my purpose of being alive at this time, and knowing and feeling like I'm meant to do more than just be in a rat race that I was in California, commuting all those hours and being told that's just what people do. The moment I heard that, I was like, not gonna do it. And I got here through friends like you, through family that supports me financially in times when I need it, and then also just more importantly emotionally when I need it. And I think for me that's living, and having worked at a mortuary for 5 years, so much unlocking happened there in that place of just like seeing like death as a form of the journey. We're not taking anything with us. It doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. From the moment that we're born, we kind of go through a path towards dying. And I don't mean that in a morbid sense, but that's life. Like, and I feel for me, that's why I live so openly and so adventurously, because why not? At the end of the day, like, something's going to happen, and I'm not going to like seek out for it to happen faster than it's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm also not going to live fearfully in the sense that I am not going to listen to my inner dialogue, and I'm not going to do what I can to connect who I really feel I should be. Um, doesn't mean that it's easy every day, and doesn't mean that I don't have my own like vices and my own things that distract me from staying on that path. But like even this conversation and us deciding to do this, and we've been talking about doing something like this for years, just
Yeah.
like putting our conversation out there, and even if it's just for us, however we edit this and post it and share it, like we're gonna do that, and we've been talking about doing that, and here we are doing it.
Exactly. Exactly. And like this is just the start of something. This is literally one. This is literally the start of a conversation. Our first conversation that we're recording and have to look back at. Like this will be my first time dealing with my voice being on like a digital recording. There's that bit.
Mm.
Like I could hear it kind of playing in the background a little bit. And I'm like, oh, is that what I sound like?
Mm.
Like that's not how I sound in my head.
Yeah,
But
that is such a huge thing for people. There was a coworker recently that like I was facilitating something, and I was like, I want to hear your opinion. And I was surprised that they were surprised to hear their own voice. And we talked about it later. And I was like, the way we sound and the way that people hear us and see us is such a huge part of this conversation. But yeah, I'm like, this is like, I know how you sounded, I guess, before the transition, but this just sounds more like you just sound more you.
and it's funny how you say that because I catch myself where my voice wants to naturally be right now, and then where sometimes I take it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I am aware of me taking it there,
Yeah.
or
I used to
like
do that all
someone
the
will
time.
catch
I'm
me.
like, oh, I sound too femme. And like that's when I hear like straight men or men like add a little bit of bass into their like I'm like, oh sweetie.
Right, and then there's some days where people will catch me, and it just depends on the time of day. Like if you catch me right after a nap,
Mm-hmm.
or if you catch me late at night and I'm about to go down for a nap, if you catch me in like a groggy mood, I'm super low.
Mm-hmm.
My voice is super, and I can't get it to raise up any higher than it is. Like there's just
Yeah.
that's where it is. When I'm excited, it gets higher. Well, I think for most people, when they're excited, it gets higher. But like if I get really really excited, I'm definitely at a higher octave, and it hurts. Like it'll hurt
Mm-hmm.
to talk at that higher,
Mm-hmm.
and I can only, I guess, hold it for so long, and then it's like my voice gets tired. I'm like, okay, I got to go back down here to give it a rest or something. And then there was the getting used to my voice being or having dropped as low as it did. I wasn't expecting it to drop that low. I mean, I knew my balls were going to drop, but they weren't supposed to. Well, whatever they're doing. supposed to do, not supposed to do, or my expectations weren't.
Yeah.
Like there's just different. And then when I hear it back, I'm like, what? Because the only time I really ever did hear my voice was pre-transition. So I think even now, like I can hear it in myself, like it's lower. But when it's actually captured on video and I have to listen to it back, it's like this reminder of like, oh yeah, it is wherever it is. It's doing whatever it's doing. And so there's just like there's
Yeah.
that.
It doesn't sound too different to me. I mean, it's still, I don't know.
And there you go.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I've always been able to just see you. So I'm like, I've always, I guess, seen you pretty much as a dude for the most part. Besides, but you weren't, in the physical sense. But you've always had like that. You've always been dad. Did you ask dad?
Yeah. All right. And it could be like an aura thing. It could be just like the fluidity thing. And
Yeah.
I do for a long time really felt like kind of in an ambiguous place.
Mm-hmm.
I was never ultra feminine.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like I was always on the masculine side.
Mm-hmm.
But I always, aside from the boobs finally being gone, I think for me that was always the one piece. Like whether or not I was growing facial hair
Yeah.
I always wanted it, but I don't think that it was ever a
You
necessity
have.
for me.
You
I've
have
always
all of
wanted
it.
facial hair.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be hairy.
Yeah.
And I think like that was one thing, but I never needed it necessarily to accomplish feeling at home with my body. For me, it was always the breasts.
Yeah.
I think I have always had like a deep voice on one side, and it just got a little deeper.
Yeah.
But I don't, and it's funny. So I was talking
Yeah.
with my therapist about this. And there was also this piece of like, not where I struggle being visible, but there's this piece. One I don't think I posted on Instagram or Facebook in a year or 2 years or whatever, however long it's been. And there was also this piece, like, from the beginning of my transition, I was trying to record as much as possible, but I wasn't seeing a change, not drastically. And I would look at other trans people's journeys, and they went from, like, one extreme to the other extreme.
Yeah.
They were, like, I don't want to call them uber feminine, but they were definitely very feminine in their appearance. And then they went to the other side and became this, like, uber ultra masculine, ripped, super bodybuilder dude. And on the other side, you watch these, trans women go from dudes to just the hyper feminine. So for me, where I was already on the butch side, like I don't have a lot of this whole drastic change. It was just kind of like, oh, you lost the boobs and you grew some facial hair, and you still kind of look the same. Your build is still the same. Your shirt is still kind of the same. Like everything still looks the same. Your fashion is still the same. Your haircuts are still the fucking same. Like, everything's the same. The cheeks are still the same. My jawline is still the same. My shoulders are all still the same. Like it almost felt like I know that I emotionally went through a transition. And I know that I transitioned. I know my name transitioned. I know my voice transitioned. Like there's a lot of stuff that came into being who I am today that's definitely a lot different than 2017. But for the longest time, I just couldn't see it.
I see it I see in the images from your Instagram. I see the difference. But you were already so connected to who you were before the physical transition that there isn't such a drastic. But I get what you're saying. To an extent.
And it is interesting that other people can see it.
Yeah.
Or I couldn't see it because there was a little piece of like I've always been very comfortable. I masked my comfortability in my butchness. But
you've always been comfortable with your body. You've always been really just comfortable.
I don't know that comfortable is the right word. I think it's just more I've been acutely aware of what my body is. And there's a sense of you can call it confidence. There's a sense of just like not that there's no use in fighting it, but there's kind of like I'll yoga. Having to look in the mirror and look at your body and just be like, that's my body.
Yeah.
Right? Like all the imperfections. I wish I was more muscular here. I wish I had a little less fat here. I wish I could grow facial hair here. I wish my cheeks weren't so big. Like having done yoga for so long and having to look in the mirror, and maybe this is even the conditioning of having to look in the mirror, never like seeing who I wanted to see and having to see who there was in the mirror and just being like, this is the soul looking back at you. Like these are the eyes looking back at you. Like this is your soul and your consciousness, and that's what's on the other side.
When you do that, would you ever just like weep or like cry?
No, I don't think I ever allowed myself to cry.
I have.
Boys don't cry. Right, but like there was this, like you don't cry.
Yeah. See, and that's the femme in me. Is like I'm so emotional. Like, but I'm not, but I am.
Right. But I wouldn't allow it. There's very few moments that I remember allowing myself to cry.
Yeah. There's something
cathartic.
It really is. It really is. For me, I've had moments over the last year where I just kind of look in the mirror and I'm like, bitch, this is you. Like with all the spots, the acne that doesn't ever stop. But just like looking at yourself in the mirror, I think is such a huge. That's why I got started doing my videographies. Over the years, is like I wanted to see the physical progression or transformation, which not a lot has changed. Like my hair fluctuates here and there, but just like hearing myself and seeing myself and like that mirror, like a physical mirror, which again, taking it back to the Matrix, I guess that's probably one of their. That's so funny. Now that I look at my mirror over there, like one of their why they use it as like a portal into the next into the real
realm.
into the real realm is it's a mirror and you like kind of go through it. Um, but I used to hate looking at I like there was so much of my life that I never actually looked at myself. I never saw the person I was. Everyone else would see these things, but I changed, the way I dress and how I look, and I focused so much on that. Um, but over the last year, like where I actually like looked at myself in the eyes and was able to like just see it all, and like see my body fluctuate from the COVID weight, and then like back to where I'm at now, and then just being, as a gay man and like seeing all the the muscular men. Like think I have a pretty good body, but all the different things that like I'm too skinny or I'm too dark or I'm too this or I'm too that. Um, and I still am pretty like I'm not that confident with my body. Like when we go to the beach or something, like I usually don't have like my shirt off. I don't like I usually am like unless I'm like in Mexico and Puerto Vallarta, that's right, like somewhere where like it's I feel more comfortable. But just being comfortable within my own skin and like seeing it
Yeah.
is such a huge thing that I don't. So many people don't do it, and I still remember the day that you called me when you're like, I have something to tell you, and I'm like, what? Like, what's happening? You're like, I think I'm gonna transition, and I was like, oh, and I hope I didn't like. I was like, I hope I didn't like downplay it. I was like, but of course, that makes sense.
And there's a piece of me that was like, I'm so glad people were just like, oh, okay.
And I mean that's
right. Like it made.
yeah.
And you said this, and like Bianca and Kim have said this. I don't know that we should be throwing out names, but their names are already out there because it's on this thing. But there was this kind of like, I told you I'm going to transition. Obviously, I had my own trepidation. There was the transition, and there's this kind of, as folks look at me, they're just like, I never, you, not to discredit the transition, but there was kind of like this, there was no change. Like, you're still you, you've always been you, like, this is how I've always seen you, this is, or maybe.
And how did that make you? How did that make you feel? I guess did that
and there
maybe
was a piece of me
discredit?
that was like, oh, thank God, like,
Okay.
like there was this piece of like more than my body parts.
Absolutely.
This, it's okay that I'm gonna do this. Like people aren't attached to my boobs the way. I mean, like, okay, Tara's reaction was a little bit off-putting. That one was the only thing that was I felt like off, and it wasn't even a big deal. Like it was just like she was going through her own. It was when I cut off all my hair when I went and did a buzz cut, and then there was just like this. The transition is super real.
Mm-hmm.
Boobs are coming off. I think for her, I looked uber masculine at that point. Like I lost my androgynous self. I think that's where I sat for a long time, like being in that androgynous zone. And I felt very comfortable there, but I knew like, no, I'm happy in the androgynous zone, but it's not all of it. And like her reaction to me cutting off all my hair and like the crying and the not being able to just put the razor through my hair was just like, girl, this isn't about you. But like I have to have space for that. Like you're dealing with whatever you're dealing with. But for me, it was kind of like for everyone else, it was just like, this has always been you. Not that they don't see the transition, but at the same time, like they're just kind of like, it wasn't this big major shift. There wasn't this big whole like giant turning of events. I think my name, like going from Jessica Lynn to Julian, was also very.
I never put those two. I love that. I never put those two.
For me, and there was also this piece of like.
That's great.
And maybe that's because of how I present it. Like there are some trans people who is just like, my past is dead to me.
Yeah.
There's no. Like, I don't want to bring it up. Like, erase all the photos, take them all off the walls. I don't want to have anything to do with that. there's still a lot for me that's there's so much of who I am in that previous name and in that previous way of being. I didn't want to let that go, and I mean, I'm not saying that looking at some of the pictures, I feel like I can see the uncomfortable, like how uncomfortable I am, but also on the same time of like, well, that's also the experience that has shaped me and gave me the courage to do all of this. So there's like this piece that always feels like that needs to come with me.
Mm.
Like, and I think that's part of why it doesn't feel like such a big transition.
Yeah.
I'm not letting go of anything that came before this. I'm not. My name was part of the transition. Like it brings the old and like forges the new. You know, I didn't start a whole brand new Instagram account with a whole brand new name.
Yeah.
I haven't done any of that because for me, this is all one life. I think for other people, they just came along with the journey. Like there was no big start, stop, go.
Yeah.
Like it's still fluid, and I think that's why my parents still kind of fuck up sometimes with the pronouns.
Yeah.
And they have more of a problem when it's like going back in time.
Mm.
And it's like for them, I was little Jessie. I was this little girl, and so like they get caught up in the telling sometimes of the telling of the stories, especially when I'm right there, and they're just like. For them, the microchips start kernel panicking, and it's just like, what comes out, comes out.
Yeah.
And I look and I just laugh about it, and I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
I get it. Like, it is, don't worry about it. But there's.
But don't let it happen again.
But don't let it happen again. Don't let it happen again. Catch yourself. But yeah, it took a really long time to get used to looking in the mirror and, like, accepting all of what there is to accept. And my doctor and I have had this conversation of, like, look, I'm acutely aware of my biology. I'm not going to ignore it or disregard it or pretend like I don't have to take care of what I need to take care of because I have the parts down there that comes with certain kind of care.
Mm-hmm.
I can't like pretend that that's not what's happening. And again, like going back to the yoga with being in a room full of mirrors and not being able to escape, like there's something very powerful about yoga in a sense of like, not just the stretching and the breathing and that exercise, but the being with the person in the mirror. Mm-hmm. Like that's a very powerful exercise.
Like that's me. Like that's you. Like
mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And are you gonna turn your back on it, or are you gonna like?
That's why so many people hate mirrors, or like hate that, or dislike their reflection or looking at themselves because it's so real. It's like that disconnection that I think the majority of people feel. I feel like that's why you have so many people that. I think that's why there's a beauty industry. That's why there's so many people that are so like ripped and like they have to like push themselves to this point of like what I see like it has to be like beauty because internally there's so much else, but like you've been able to connect it in a way that so many people go from like one extreme to the other, like you're saying, but for you it's just like it just made sense. Like, oh yeah, like, and we're at a place in society where it's like, yeah, like you can do that and it's safe and you had all the tools and the people and the support system. And again, I just think if people see this down the line, hopefully they feel comfortable to explore this on their own and not feel that they need necessarily the support system, but that they do what's right for them because the support will come once you become more connected with your authentic self instead of like putting all these layers and over you that keeps you vibrating on a whole different frequency. And so I just love it. I love your journey. I love being part of it.
Ditto.
In whichever way.
Ditto. Likewise.
We've seen some changes.
We have. The two of us have seen a lot of changes. I think that we've grown a lot in 11 years.
Yeah.
We've both come a long way in 11 years, just in our operations, in our thinking, in our openness, in our language, in the topics that we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of that, I think points to taking a moment, looking at that person in the mirror, and questioning,
Yeah.
questioning the status quo, because we've been put in a position where we've had to question. Well, we started out questioning ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it starts. You start questioning yourselves and how do you fit? What are you doing? All that. You go through those things of questions.
And not running from it, and not pushing it down, and not distracting with.
And then start asking, why is this so?
Mm-hmm.
Or why does this feel not in line? Like, why does this not feel like it meshes with everything else? Like, why is there discongruent little speed bump or whatever that is? And then so you start questioning, not questioning gravity, but you start questioning the constructs.
Mm-hmm.
And you start really start opening pathways. You start opening up conversations. You start opening up curiosities. You start asking those questions. And I'm not saying conspiracy theories are out there, because we all have them. It just depends on how you're looking at it. And I don't think we should discredit or discount those thoughts. Like, it's worth exploring. Like, coincidences, there are only so many.
Yeah.
True coincidences. But 6 degrees of separation means there's something happening. So, like, whether or not we want to believe all the conspiracy theories or not, or whether we take stock in them, or however many we choose to go down the rabbit hole with, when there's 6 degrees of separation, there's something happening.
Mm.
And there's intuition. I think that a lot of us are out of, I don't want to say we're out of practice listening to our guts and our inner voice. A lot of us have, I don't want to say stopped listening, but that inner voice and that intuition gets compared to the curated propaganda that we see, the curated lives that we see, and that's not a fair comparison for individuals to be making. I think that they can look at things and find commonality, but I think that it has to always come with a grain of like reflection, like introspective reflection and application. And I don't think that a lot of us stop and take the time. Like, I didn't do that until I really started transitioning. I thought that I for a very long time did think and listen and hear and try to be objective and have empathy, but I don't think that it really came until I went through my own transition and had to see who I was and where I was, and like not dealing with my minority community, but just like, or not just being in a minority community, but just really stopping and thinking like, I'm actively making this choice for myself, and it's not something that I'm just falling in line with. Like, it was very easy for me to be a chameleon and just like fall in line and do what was out there to do, like going into an all-girls Catholic school and being very well aware that I was all about loving on girls and having girl parts. So the only language I had was being lesbian. Knowing deep inside, I knew I was a dude somehow, in some way. Didn't have a way to articulate that. But like, having to have that conversation with myself, I could have easily just gone the route of hiding this my whole life and just like doing what so many closeted people do. They just go through the motions and they don't interact with their intuition. And we're out of practice, like thinking for ourselves. I look at the Roman Catholic Church in that regard. Trump is not a god, and yet he's revered with, or synonymous now with, conservative Christian America. And it's kind of like, well, none of those values of what he is or represents are in line with being conservative, really, or real conservative thinking. So it's like this lack of being able to digest something and then really understanding the implications and the impact. Like, I thought about it as being a left Democrat or liberal or whatever you want to call it. Like, am I way leftist? Like, am I asking people to accept me too much. There's like the moment of pausing and thinking of like, how are my choices impacting other people? Am I shoving this down people's throats? Asking trans athletes to just be trans athletes and let them play. Like, there's like the going back and forth, even for myself. But I think that's people have stopped really like deeply thinking and deeply questioning and coming to the table with that. And I think some people are starting to more of those conversations are happening, and more of those conversations are being public. And we're watching just immediate the immediate response, not the thoughtful response, just the reaction.
It's the barking back. It's like fucking dogs just sniffing each other's butts and then barking and biting each other. It's like I see that so much here, and in some ways I feel conservative, and in some ways I feel liberal, but I hate both of those terms when it comes to like my right to vote and politically. And just even seeing the faces that now represent the country, I'm like, I still don't feel connected to that person making these decisions, but here we are. I feel like that's the construct. It's like, still people not connected to the reality of society, yet individuals are called crazy because they think different, or they're, our intuition has become awakened over time and has been refined over time. And there's so many people that just are not there, and that clash of frequencies when you're like physically near those people is like, it's volatile sometimes. It's just like, I don't, that's why, like, with painting my nails and like doing the things that I do, I was like, is this kind of like, is this too much? But I like it. I need a little bit of sparkle. It's holiday, and I feel like listening to you tonight, it's like I've never really identified as androgynous, but I feel over time I have been kind of on an androgynous spectrum. I remember one time like going to, I think, like the Boys and Girls Club with one of my cousins over the summer, and I used to wear like bandanas and I was really really thin, like super skinny then, and I went into the boys' bath. I went to the bathroom, went to the boys' bathroom, and when I came out, like the entire pool was like laughing at me, like literally the whole place. And I was like, "What? Why is everyone laughing?" They thought I went into the wrong bathroom, and I didn't really have that recollection until this conversation of like one of those moments again of like me being called outside of myself. Like I'm just like, so much is going on with my family. I'm just here with my cousin who's calling herself Hillary when her name is Rosalinda. And I'm like, wait, that's not her name. And I'm like dealing with that. And then I come out to I literally came out of the bathroom and everyone's laughing at me. And I'm like I was just kind of like, what the fuck? And they're like, you went into the wrong bathroom. And I was like, no, and I had like, I remember taking off my little like bandana, and I was like, I had a shaved head, like, and I jumped, and then I had to take like like, I guess I had some sort of shirt on, and when I took my shirt off, they were just kind of like, oh. But that was like one of those I've had different moments in my life where I've been laughed at just by being me. I remember taking a dance class, and the way that I danced and moved, I remember being laughed at because like, oh, this is Rudy's favorite part. And then that being a moment. And then I remember in Spanish class being laughed at by my teacher and by the class because of the way that I said, and I'll say it correctly now, I guess, presente, but the way I said presente or something, the way, like, I didn't speak Spanish, like, and literally my teacher laughed, and the whole class, like, laughed. So, like, these different just me, just
Yeah.
like being me and like saying how I say something or how I carry it, how I walk or how I talk. Like there's always been these moments where I'm like, okay. And like even last night, so like last night I finally had the right words. I was like, you're just another, I won't say the full thing, but you're just another person with an irrelevant opinion. Um, and that is what I process. Like, and I like it sometimes because it's just like, then there's something about me naturally that makes people think different. And I know that me just walking into a space does that, but sometimes, most times, I just like to be like, I just like to just chill. I just like to be me. I feel like so many people here in DC when I got here, they want to put me into this box and they want to like, they don't fully understand who I am, or they want to assume things, or they want to say things about me or have, and I haven't had that in a long time, and it's frustrating because I know it's happening even still. And I'm like, I do my best not to care because I really don't, but then I do because I'm like, why? Like, what, like, why do people continuously have to like say or do these things where I'm like, I'm just me. Like, I don't do those things that you assume me to do. I'm not that person that you want me to be. Um, and it's learning. It's my journey. This is the life. This is the soul that I'm carrying within this vessel, and that's why like drag has been such a fun sort of exploration. I feel like that's the I don't necessarily want to be a woman. Like I don't feel like that is my thing. Not my thing. That's not the right word. I don't feel like
It's not
I
your calling. It
it's
doesn't
not
call to you.
yeah, it's not like I don't want to be a woman, but I like pretending to be a woman. I like the theater and the artistry of I think what drag is because I think I also have like the body. It's just like there's certain things, but I do like being this sort of
And
androgynous like
I want to touch on something that you also just said was there's this piece about how you bring people to question, or you bring people to have to think differently. And there's a little bit about drag theater that forces people to think outside the box a little bit, right?
Mhm.
Like they have to accept this very masculine person underneath because not all drag queens are trans, right? Like
Yeah,
to
I
your
know.
point, like there's
Well, there's a
there's
difference I think between trans and
there's totally a difference between trans and drag
yeah,
queens. Like, and there are definitely some drag queens who are trans, and
yeah, yeah.
that was their journey, but not for everybody. And I think there's, and I could be putting words in your mouth, but there's a piece of attraction for it in the sense that it naturally evokes this questioning of everything that there ever was in the stereotypes, and like it literally forces you to think different,
Hmm.
and you do, and you have that energy to do it, and maybe that's another layer, or I'm not going to explain it. Like I'm not going to say that this is why you're attracted to drag,
Hmm.
but I think that it's a
Well,
layer.
you know me pretty well, so
Yeah, but it's, and I'm only connecting the two dots together because when you've just started kind of exploring drag, there's obviously an attraction to it, and I think it does necessarily come for when you're on stage. It naturally is a thing to make people think. When you're on stage at Today at Apple, another thing. Like you're educating people to think, or you're inviting people into that conversation to think differently. And I think drag also does it, and it does it in a very drastic way. It's not slow,
hmm.
right? Like sometimes the everyday training it out, you can disregard that, but the everyday training that you do every day, where you literally ask people to think different. This is like the, I'm not going to call it the hyper side, but this is the, it brings that questioning
I
within the
like that.
first, from just a visual standpoint,
Yeah.
and then the speaking and the other artistry that comes around with it. automatically introduces like more layers of it. And I think it's a natural medium to start bringing up those questions of like, we're not all made the same.
Mm.
We don't all express ourselves in the same way. We have different ideas of beauty and sexy. And it's something that's drag has been around. It was the very first film.
We talked about this when you came.
Yeah. The very
George
first,
Washington, Queen.
Yeah.
Those shoes, those shoes and the heels and the tights.
Shakespeare and when theater first came about, it was always drag.
Mm.
It was again, going back to like the very first profession there ever was prostitution.
Mm.
The very first form of artistry was drag. It was the birth of film.
Mm.
Like, the birth of telling stories. Native American, it was the birth of having the healing energy. Someone who could harness... Oh, I wonder if I'm being too loud. My brother's calling me. Hold on. Hello. Yeah. What do you need? I don't need to beat. What's going on? What? Lovely. I have rapid tests. Mm-hmm. Do we need to take some rapid tests? I have rapid tests. We'll take one of your home. Oh, bro, you should have just asked. I have 1 million. From work, I told you guys that last time. I brought them to the last holiday stuff. They're so funny. Will you give me a cheeseburger? Just a regular, not a double cheeseburger, just a regular cheeseburger. Yeah. Should I get 2 of them?